Hi guys, Gaming Bear here. Right, watching Bearing, you know us, bears have really got to stick together. And so, there's something I noticed in his video which has just come up. You know, bears watching bears, and that's not the name of it, but, you know, I've got to do it. And, well, first a little bit from what he's promoting at the beginning of his video. Not for me, not for money for me or anything, just for a little bit of help to him. So I'm going to link through to him. But and then pointing out something that came up in his video which I want to say about. So bear with me. Oh goodness, sorry, no, I didn't really didn't mean that. Oops. Oops.
This video is brought to you by Virtual Shield. Virtual Shield is an easy-to-use VPN designed to protect all of your devices. It'll encrypt all of your web traffic, protect your identity, and even change your location. Virtual Shield is the world's most user-friendly VPN, and you can try it free for 30 days.
See, I thought I would use this as well.
The Laurier University Rainbow Center has put up a sign saying trans students deserve an apology.
Okay. If you're not up to speed with the free speech debacle going on at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada, you should watch these two videos.
So, watching the two videos, there's something this links through to. The main point is on Bearing's video himself, which is a video, and I will link through to that. But there's something that he said, which I wanted to make a point to, so I'm going to skip through to that. So bear with me. Oh, good. I keep doing it, but let's just do it.
The voices of trans students are being silenced on this campus and are not being taken into account.
Howie. His president expects to have the final report in March. Now, the damage done to Laurier's reputation by the three faculty members in Lindsay Shepherd's recording was so significant that the university's only viable option was to apologise. Waiting 5 months to comment on the matter would mean an even bigger PR disaster than the catastrophic PR disaster they're trying to deal with now.
Toby Finley feels the conversation around freedom of speech is being used to cover up and allow a lot of transphobia within the community.
Well, Toby seems a bit fucking paranoid. He was just complaining about being silenced while being interviewed for the news. So who gives a fuck what Toby feels? If he's actually experiencing some kind of injustice, like in actual reality, then I'm sure he'll be able to find recourse or remedy in that gendered and sexual violence policy that reads like a fucking encyclopedia set. The pearl clutching being done by Toby and his Rainbow Centre mates over a teaching assistant showing her class 5 minutes worth of irrelevant televised debate is pathetic. The threat we face from instructors who insist they must have a right to revoke our dignity because... And then they link to a Vice article called, "For trans folks, free speech can be silencing." Now, I'm not... a right to revoke our dignity because... And then they link to a Vice article called, "For trans folks, free speech can be silencing." Now, I'm not going to focus on the article, but it attempts to justify the exchange of everyone's right to freely express themselves for the oversensitive, delicate feelings of some trans and non-binary people. Agreed?
So, there seems to be... Everyone needs to be looked after. I think we should look at exactly what the issue is and what's happening on the campus there, and then have a look at the video that Jordan Peterson actually put, or the video of him. He didn't put it out, so let's have a look at that.
Now, as you may or may not be aware, there was a free speech rally held at Laurier on the 24th of November, which featured Lindsay Shepherd as the main speaker.
It genuinely worries me that the Wilfrid Laurier University Rainbow Center...
The voices of trans students are being silenced on this campus and are not being taken into account.
The Diversity and Equity Office and some individuals of both inside and outside the campus community believe I am transphobic. I'll tell you why this worries me.
Well, it sort of worries me as well. So we need to find out why people are saying it. Because is it true that she is transphobic? And what evidence is out there for that? Are they just coming up with things? How are they saying? What evidence do they have for the fact that she is transphobic? And how can people like this, without evidence, keep coming up with these blanket statements based on non-reality? Or if it is based on reality, where is the evidence? We need to have the evidence. They can't just keep spouting, as Bearing might say, bullshit, you know? So, let's get back to what she said in the video.
People in this world who have personal problems with trans people, whether that is religious, moral, or a personal prejudice. A phobia, by definition, is an irrational fear of something. I am not a person who holds any prejudice.
So, in her own words, she's not a person who holds any prejudice. So, we have her quoted. So, if there's any evidence out there, I think people need to come forward with it, which would make her out to be a liar. But if there is none, then she's standing up for herself without having the evidence that they seem to say that there's evidence against her. So we need to see that evidence to know and to be able to back up what they're saying. You know, we need to know evidentially what is happening. So let's skip forward to one of the issues.
So if you are labeling someone like me transphobic, it becomes very clear to me that the leftist authoritarianism has gone too far.
Now, as all this was familiar faces from the Rainbow Centre were just across the street, holding a silent demonstration in the interests of justice for trans people.
My name is Toby Finley. My pronouns are they and them.
My name is Milas Houston. My pronouns are also they and them.
We're here as part of a counter-demonstration to a free speech rally.
What were the air quotes supposed to mean? Are you
Are also they and them.
We're here as part of a counter-demonstration to a free speech rally.
What were the air quotes?
Finley, my pronouns are they and them.
So looking at the issue, what is happening? They can't both be, well, no, actually, potentially they could both be being stifled. So are they both being stifled, and who is stifling them if that's happening? So we've got a situation where are they being either side being stifled, and B, by who, and C, why? Why are they being stifled? If if it's happening, B, we need to find out why, and what is the underpinning situation? Because potentially both sides could be being undermined, and people should have the right not to be undermined in their environment. I'm looking at it from both sides. So let's have a listen further.
We're here as part of a counter-demonstration to a free speech rally.
What were the air quotes supposed to mean? Are you implying that the free speech rally isn't actually a free speech rally? And if
So yeah, we get total agreement. But thinking about this side of things, something I was watching on Milo Yiannopoulos, what is happening to censorship at the moment? Not just these trans people, not just she's saying she's being stifled in the background. What else is happening in the world in general? So let's have a look. This is from a video of Milo Yiannopoulos and something that's put out there to have a look at a point. And I found this quite fascinating. You might as well. So, like I say, bear with me. I'm going to carry on saying I'm not doing it on purpose. It just works.
Alexa, who is Ben Shapiro?
Benjamin Aaron Shapiro is an American conservative political commentator, columnist, author, radio talk show host, media executive, activist, and attorney.
Alexa, who is Amy Schumer?
Amy Beth Schumer is an American stand-up comedian, writer, actress, and producer.
Comedian? Alexa, who is Milo Yiannopoulos?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, who is Lena Dunham?
Lena Dunham is an American actress, writer, producer, and director.
Who is Linda Sarsour?
Linda Sarsour is a Palestinian-American political activist and former executive director of the Arab American Association of New York.
Alexa.
So I'm looking at this. There seems to be someone is not programming her with all the information. So I think if we look at this and say that someone hasn't done a complete job, or other people might say someone has done a complete job, but against Milo Yiannopoulos and other people. But what is the situation? It should be free speech, and the information about everybody should be out there. This shouldn't be politicized. The information that should be coming through to us shouldn't be biased. Now, in my opinion, this is looking a little bit suspect. Everybody needs, all the information needs to be out there, and there needs to be, if someone's working and controlling the narrative, One, why are they doing it? B, they shouldn't be doing it. And C, what can we do about it? And if we can't do anything about it, who should be regulating the organisations who might be doing this in the background, either from one side or the other? No side should be allowed to be able to do this. I'm on the total free speech side of things. I want everybody to have their voice and everybody to be heard and everyone to be known about and have their chance to stand up, to be counted and to be listened to. And if their ideas are good, they can go forward into the melting pot. If their ideas are bad, then everyone can laugh at them. But people should be allowed to laugh at them, or agree with them. Everyone should have their right to free, independent thought and to stand up with their ideas and just to be allowed to say and to have the backing of people who agree with them. But this is almost like censorship. Let's have a watch a little bit further.
Who is Milo Yiannopoulos?
I'm not sure.
Who is Milo Yiannopoulos?
I don't know that one.
Who is Milo?
Rory Farah, better known by his stage name Milo, is an American alternative hip-hop musician from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Alexa, who is Milo Yiannopoulos?
I don't know that. Sorry, I'm not sure about that.
Hold on. So I think whoever is doing this, if this is from Amazon, I think someone needs to be sorting out their tech guys or girls, their tech people, or whatever gender binary they're working with today. And I'm all for everybody being themselves, or I can't get the he, she, I don't get it. I don't get the different names. So I'm just going to stick with the old style, or if someone tells me what people are, then I'm going to work with that. But I'm sorry, I find it so confusing. I'm not doing it on purpose. I want to respect everybody. Everyone's allowed to be who they are, and that's just it. People should be allowed to be and say what they want. And I think someone needs to sort out the reprogramming of the programming of these with the right information. I think they're just a little bit behind. I think maybe the right information hasn't been put out there. I think maybe they're still working through it. It's sort of a work in progress. It can't be that this is censorship, can it? Let's have a listen to the rest of this, or a bit more of this.
Sorry, I don't know that.
What is censorship?
The term censorship has two distinct meanings. As a noun, 1. Counterintelligence achieved by banning or deleting any information of value to the enemy. 2. Deleting parts of publications or correspondence or theatrical performances.
Now, who is Milo Yiannopoulos?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Right, so this could be... Well, we need to look at this in the face of who I read the book 1984. It was actually 1985 when I read it. I missed it by 1 year. I was at school, and so I missed it by 1 year. But let's have a listen to, let's see a bit of information about the situation of censorship or potential censorship, and have a look at the overall picture of what may be happening. Now, this is something put out a couple of years ago by Carl Benjamin, otherwise known as Sargon of Akkad. So let's have a listen to what he said.
Rules for Radicals was a book written in 1971 by Saul Alinsky. Much has been made of this book, and there seem to be a great number of misconceptions surrounding it, to the point where it's becoming some sort of forbidden literature. I recently read this book and found it very informative and very interesting, and so I'd like to present my analysis of it to you.
Right, well, I'm going to cherry pick a little bit, having a look through and looking at the situation. Everyone says about 1984, so we will get to that side of things, but let's follow this through.
Alinsky's rules and ideas are principles and tactics that can be applied by any group of have-nots against the haves. It was a product of its time, of course, and so the examples given in the book are usually liberal radicals against the conservative establishment. But this is not the limit of what Alinsky is saying.
Right, so it's used for those who are oppressed to work against the ruling elites and to try and stop the structure from dominating too much, which in a way is pretty good. You know, you want the people who are at the top to realise that they're there because of the majority. So in itself, I think that is a really, really useful thing, that people can be able to find their own voice and to have their supposed representatives actually accountable to them, as they should be. As getting back to how it was that the village elders would go forward and represent the tribe and do the negotiating and do what's benefit for society, for the community they represented, and then bring that good back to the society. And they were there because they were the most knowledgeable, the best to represent, which may not be happening at the moment. So let's have a listen further.
This categorization is used to demonstrate how hot each group is, or how likely political change is to come from each group. The haves want to keep things as they are and are opposed to change. Thermopolitically, they are cold and determined to freeze the status quo. The have-a-little want-mores generally seek the safe way, where they can profit by change and yet not risk losing the little they have. Thermopolitically, they are tepid and rooted in inertia. The have-nots are a mass of cold ashes of resignation and fatalism. But inside, there are the glowing embers of hope, which can be fanned by the building of means of obtaining power. Once the fever begins, the flame will follow. They have nowhere to go but up.
So, we're looking at a situation where the ability of people to talk about things and to try and get the people at the top to be accountable, the society working together to help those at the top do what they need them to do. But what I'm considering and proposing is that the situation is that this was how things were until certain people became that they were in the radical situation, moved up, and now are in positions of authority and are still using these means to keep opposition down. They're the haves, and they're still using. So they've now moved into this position, but they've learned through Alinskyan tactics how to gain power, how to turn things on people. Let's look further.
When dealing with situations proportionally less important, the question can be reframed as, do these particular ends justify these particular means? And it becomes far more pragmatic and applicable to the real world. Quote, to say that corrupt means corrupt the ends is to believe in the immaculate conception of ends and principles. The real arena is corrupt and bloody. Life is a corrupting process, from the time a child learns to play his mother off against his father in the politics of when to go to bed. He who fears corruption fears life. Whether you agree with that or not, it's this justification that Alinsky uses to dismiss the armchair moralists.
So we need to look at who is using these means and ends of power at the present time, and how is it being exploited to either keep a group up or down. Where are we? What is happening to society at the moment? Who is in power? What are they doing? And why? Or what are they trying to stabilise? What are they trying to get? That is what we need to try and understand. And then we can decide whether it's in our best interest. Everyone has their own particular slant on things. As if you have a look at the Solinsky side of things, it's lots of individuals coming together with a multiplicity of different ideas, but by coming under one banner, they manage to push through in a larger wave one focus that the whole group embodies, even though individually they have their own individual metrics. So let's look further on that. These rules are important in the background, so I think I'm just going to put them up so you can read them for yourself about the judgments. It's boring, but very vital for you to at least consider. So following through what Sagan said, or Carl, this is going to link through to some ideas, and then we're going to try and look and see where it goes in real life and in historical precedent to see where we are.
So in addition to these rules, several important points are raised in this chapter. First, all mass political action must be boiled down to, we are right, they are wrong. Because as Alinsky puts it, all effective actions require the passport of morality. Quote, the Declaration of Independence, as a declaration of war, had to be what it was, 100% statement of the justice of the cause of the colonists, and 100% denunciation of the role of the British government as evil and unjust. Our cause had to be all shining justice, allied with the angels. Theirs had to be all evil, tied to the devil. In no war has the enemy or cause ever been grey. Therefore, from one point of view the omission was justified, from the other it was deliberate deceit.
So, back to the Wilfrid Laurier situation in question. Are both thinking they're in the right, or putting forward that they're in the right, and treating the other as the ultimate evil to get their own ends at the end of the day. So they're following Saul Alinsky's theories and putting them into practice, and to be able to maintain a situation or to obtain a situation. And that's where we find ourselves at the moment.
Part of a counter-demonstration to a free speech rally.
What were the air quotes supposed to mean? Are you implying that the free speech rally isn't actually a free speech rally? And if it's not a free speech rally, what do you think it is?
That has been organized in conjunction with folks at Wilfrid Laurier University. We're a group of trans and non-binary students who are here to say that trans students deserve justice.
Yeah, of course.
So, looking at the underlying situation, we have both sides saying that they want justice, and this is both can be true. They can both feel that they're in a situation where they don't have justice, and we need to look at that from a societal point of view to be able to try and help look after the majority and not put people down, but to see if there's an underlying situation that's actually coming. Not just it's great if this is coming from the underclass and from people who want to have their voice heard, but if this is coming from the masters at the top, is that right? That if this is being used as a tactic to undermine us and to keep us in our places, then that's a bit wrong, and that's more like 1984. So let's look on at this.
Liberatevi dei vostri padroni. Sono loro che distruggono la vostra vita. Annientatevi. Non avete niente da perdere e tutto da guadagnare.
So what you see is the undermining of everybody in the background. They're being taken along, dragged along, fed what's happening to them, and suddenly there's someone in our terms as being red-pilled. They're starting to see what's happening underneath. And that's what we need to look at. What is actually being shown in this adaptation of the book of what could potentially be happening, and to look at what's happening in our own society of who's doing what, to come up with an idea of making things right, making things better. So let's see. What we have is a guy who's in the machine, and his job is to censor and to change history so that it's true facts, it's a new true reality. All the old ways of thinking about things, the unpalatable ways, the ways things have been, are being just taken and rewritten. And when this new history is rethought of, it's like the victors being able to write history. And that's what is at the heart of this. of what is truth. And in 1984, it's looking, well, make up your own mind.
Sostituire vocabolo con psicovità. Miniprod garantisce non riduzione a 30 grammi, razione cioccolata 1984.
Sadly, this is Italian, as you may have noticed, and they're censoring the books. They're censoring all news, all media, all history. So, sadly, my Italian is very basic. So what you're seeing is them actually taking out things historical and editing them. So ignore the Italian, but look at what they're doing in the background. And is this happening in our own reality?
Riferimento Miniprod cioccolato rettificato.
Please ignore the Italian.
Sostituire vocabolo con psicovità. Miniprod garantisce non riduzione a 30 grammi, razione cioccolata 1984. Riferimento Times 14284, pagina 3, rettificare così. Miniprod prevede aumento cioccolazione da 20 a 25 grammi la settimana per l'aprile 1984.
What they're doing in the background is deciding on what needs to change to work with their version of history. They then pull all records of events, everything that leads to single things, all the histories, all the writings, all the music, everything that links to anything that they deem bad thing. And they delete it, alter it, make it palatable for their viewpoint. Leading on to what we're going to see is in 1984, and in the film it shows that they've made society to be in such a situation where people aren't supposed to touch each other, aren't supposed to think, separated and moving in different circles and not allowed to interact, so they can't work together to undermine the society that the overlords has created.
Ti sei fatta male?
Non è niente. È questo braccio. Ma presto potrò usarlo di nuovo. Fratello, per favore.
Ti senti?
You could see that he wasn't supposed to actually interact, and he's breaking rules by doing that, by actually helping another human being. And that's part of the human condition. You help each other as societies, you work together, and it's about all being one and then working for the greater good. But rather than it being as shown in the 1984, is that it's the greater good, or the good at the top, that tells society what they need to be doing. Now, where are things in our life? Where do things relate? How does it work in this situation? Where are we? Are we cogs in the machine? It's a heck of a point. So you're wondering who this is? Well, the pictures here are, this is the father of a KGB defector from the 80s, and who put forward what the plans from Soviet Russia were to fight a war under the surface against the West, and the tactics that were being put in place prior to this, prior to his defection in the 1980s, of what was being done in the background to subvert Western society. The full version was put up by Wise Wanderer in 2016, and I've just looked up a Russian KGB defector, and it's Yuri Bezmenov. So that's who the spy was, that's who came in from the cold, that's who came to the West, and this is his own words about what is being done in the background.
My father was, he is on the left here, my father was officer of the General Staff of the Soviet Army. He was inspector of land forces, Soviet troops stationed in countries like Mongolia, Cuba, East European countries. This is the picture taken at the entrance of my Institute of Oriental Languages. It's a part of Moscow State University. As every Soviet student, I was, quote-unquote, volunteering for harvesting grain in Kazakhstan. By the end of my training in school, I was recruited by the KGB. This picture was taken on that day, and you can see again how happy it feels to be recruited by the KGB. Pay special attention to number of bottles on the table. One of my functions was to keep foreign guests permanently intoxicated the moment they land at Moscow airport. In 1967, the KGB attached me to this magazine, Look magazine. A group of 12 people arrived to USSR from United States to cover the 50th anniversary of October Socialist Revolution in my country. From the first page to the last page, it was a package of lies.
So we're looking deception and the collectivism from the Soviet Union to undermine the West as a KGB systemic attack on the West.
Our conversation is with Mr. Yuri Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. One of his interesting assignments was to brainwash foreign diplomats when they visited Moscow. And he'll tell us a little bit about how they did this and how they planted information which eventually wound up in the press of the free world. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Mr. Bezmenov, I'd like to begin by having you tell us a little bit about some of your childhood memories.
Well, the most vivid memory of my childhood was Second World War, or to be more precise, the end of the Second World War, when all of a sudden United States, from a friendly nation, which helped us to defeat Nazism, turned overnight into a deadly enemy. And it was very shocking because all newspapers were trying to present an image of belligerent, aggressive American imperialism. Most of the things that we were taught is that United States is aggressive power, which is just about to invade our beautiful, free, socialist country, that American CIA is dropping Colorado beetles on our beautiful potato fields to eliminate our crops. And each schoolboy had a picture of Colorado bug on the back page of his notebook. And we were instructed to go into collective fields to search for those little Colorado bugs. Of course, we couldn't find any. Neither we could find many potatoes. And that was explained again by the encroachments of the decadent imperialist power. The anti-American paranoia, hysteria in the Soviet propaganda was to of such a higher degree that many less skeptical people or less stubborn would really believe that the United States is just about to invade our beautiful motherland.
So what we're looking at is a lot of propaganda to the people to make them believe things that may not be true. So we need to understand where the evidence is coming from, to look at the bigger picture, to see how this relates back to our current situation, and the picture on the front line with the two groups thinking they're being undermined and thinking they're both under threat. What is the fundamental truth? Is there a fundamental truth? How many truths and realities are there? And that's what I want to investigate. So let's move this on. Sadly, this is from the 1980s, so it's really bad condition. So bear in mind, at least it's not Italian. And this is him talking in the 80s about the system put in place. So let's have a listen.
Is the term, if you look in a dictionary or criminal code to that matter, usually is explained as a part of activity to destroy things like religion, government system, political, economical system of a country. And usually it's linked to espionage and such romantic.
So we're looking at underlining the destruction of systems, of religion, the family, the economics. Does anyone see anything that's been happening? So attacks on religion, attacks on the economy, and society. Interesting. And this was back in the 60s, back in the 80s, when he was warning us about this. And who listened? Who listened to him?
Romantic things as blowing up bridges, sidetracking trains, cloak and dagger activity in Hollywood style. What I'm going to talk about now has absolutely nothing to do with the cliché of espionage or KGB activity of collecting information. So the greatest mistake or misconception, I think, is that whenever we are talking about KGB, for some strange reason, starting from Hollywood movie makers to professors of political science and quote-unquote experts on Soviet affairs, or Kremlinologists as they call themselves, they think that the most desirable thing for Andropov and the whole KGB is to steal blueprints of some supersonic jet, bring it back to Soviet Union and sell it to the Soviet military-industrial complex. It's only partly true. If we take the whole time, money, and manpower that the Soviet Union and KGB in particular spends outside of USSR border, we will discover, of course there are no official statistics unlike with CIA or FBI, that the espionage as such occupies only 10 to 15% of money, time, and manpower. 15% of the activity of KGB. The rest, 85%, is always subversion. And unlike a dictionary of English, Oxford Dictionary, subversion in Soviet terminology means always a destructive, aggressive activity aimed to destroy the country, nation, or geographical area of your enemy. So there's no romantics in there, absolutely. No blowing up bridges, no microfilms in Coca-Cola cans, nothing of that sort. No James Bond nonsense. It's most of this activity is overt, legitimate, and easily observable if you give yourself time and trouble to observe it. But according to the law and law enforcement systems of the Western civilization, it's not a crime. Exactly because of misconception, manipulation of terms. We think that subverter is a person who is going to blow up our beautiful bridges. No. Subverter is a student who comes for exchange, a diplomat, an actor, an artist, a journalist like myself was 10 years ago. Now, subversion is an activity which is a two-way traffic. You cannot subvert an enemy which doesn't want to be subverted. If you know history of Japan, for example, before 20th century, Japan was a closed society. The moment a foreign boat comes to the shores of Japan, the Imperial Japanese Army politely tells them to get lost. And if American salesman comes to the shore of Japan, let's say 60 or 70 years from now back, and says, oh, I have a very beautiful vacuum cleaner for you, you know, with the good financing, he says, please leave us, we don't need your vacuum cleaner. If they...
So what we're looking at is the subversion of the West through different means, all linking back to the fundamentals and the radical ideals of attacking the underpinning ideas of that society. So, underpinning, let's look at what the claims were that the spy had said were the underpinning ideals that they wanted. One of them, the first we'll look at, is the underpinning of the financial system and destroying the finances of the West. This is Stefan Molyneux.
Yes, the, oh, I know how this video's gonna go. I haven't watched this video yet, but let me take a guess. He's a cop defender, he's a, whatever, right? So, guy wrote on The Truth About Video, The Truth About Poverty. I've not watched this video yet, but I think I've started to intuit a few things about the way this guy thinks. His conclusion will probably be that we need to double down on the disastrous economic policies of the Republicans. Oh yeah, because I'm such a Republican. Like more tax cuts, loopholes, and giveaways to the super rich. And then the cutting back or elimination of all governmental assistance programs to the poor. Regardless of any political ideologies of the country, the economic facts are that such government assistance programs are one of the most effective ways to stimulate the economy, as opposed to the failed trickle-down policies that were concocted by Reagan and his ilk. So, give a poor person money and he or she goes right out and spends it on badly needed goods and services. Oh, man. Oh, God. Are you typing with... You could have a forehead small enough to type with, like a tiny little ball-peen hammer, slowly eradicating reason from the world. So, give a poor person money and he goes out and spends it, and that stimulates economic activity. You know what's great about that? It's like, I need a blood transfusion. Can you take it from my left arm and put it in my right arm? Because even though you'll spill a lot along the way, I guess I'll end up with more blood. I mean, it's just madness. When, you know, you're giving that poor person money. Where's it coming from? Where is it coming from? Come on, think just a tiny bit. Just a tiny little bit. Look, I have a swimming pool. It's half full. I need it to be more full. So I'm going to take water from the deep end and I'm going to scoop it out from the deep end and pour it into the shallow end.
So we're looking at a theory of taking money from where there's only a certain amount of money and giving it to society to pretend that you have money. So this is one of the hearts of the problem. And then what has been put into place is actually the stealing from future generations, of creating a debt of overspending for the past 30 years, which then passes it on to future generations and causes huger and huger problems of indebtedness that the West has as a strategy from the Soviet Union to destroy the West. But because it's easy for, and it's been designed to get politicians in place to use that power of the promise of free stuff now to buy votes, get themselves into power, because it's the easy route. They weren't all thinking, oh, I'm doing this to destroy the West. They were looking for an easy way to gain power and enrich themselves and do well for their families. So you could see where they're coming from. So we've looked at the financial situation and what's happening. Well, according to Yuri Bezmenov, they're trying to undermine the fundamentals to destroy society as a war against the West.
To preserve their culture, ideology, traditions, values intact. You were not able to subvert Japan. You cannot subvert Soviet Union because the borders are closed. The media is censored by the government. The population is controlled by the KGB and internal police. With all the beautiful glossy pictures of Time magazine and Magazine America, which is published by the American embassy in Moscow, you cannot subvert Soviet citizens because the magazine never reaches Soviet citizens. It's collected from the newsstands and thrown to garbage can.
So what we're looking at, the modern age, the YouTube and the electronic age has brought a whole new way of thinking and the red pilling of society, one way or the other. But it's great to have the ideas out there, but we need to keep the internet free. We need to make sure that it's not monopolized, that certain people with certain agendas don't get to dictate. And looking back to the initial thing of certain corporations having the big guns, and maybe it's a mistake them not actually having certain people shown, making certain things disappear, certain people disappear, likening the overall picture with 1984, that the big organizations who don't like certain speech, certain people, are just erasing them from the here and now and from history. Like in 1984, the Big Brother situation is already here, but it's a Soviet style conspiracy which has come out from the media and academia from the 60s right the way through. The professors who have worked their way through are now in positions of power. The people who've come through, we're essentially looking at the baby boomers who've come through, great socialist ideas, wanting a greater world, but they're actually following through. And as Yuri Bezmenov says, that they're useful idiots to the Soviet machine. Now, that's not an exact quote, but it's along those lines, that he says that they would be when the Soviets control the world, when socialism controls the world, the useful idiots like them would be the first against the wall because they're the most dangerous. I'll try and find that quote for you. Before we get there, I want to show in his own words what they see subversion as and the process they've put in place.
Every student who is taught to be dealing further in his future career with foreigners. What subversion is? Basically, it consists of 4 periods, time-wise. If we start from here and go this way, time, right? This is the beginning point. The first stage of subversion is the process which is called, basically, demoralization. It says for itself what it is. It takes from say 15 to 20 years to demoralize a society. Why 15 or 20 years? This is the time sufficient to educate one generation of students or children. One generation. One lifetime span of a person, a human being, which is dedicated to study, to shaping up the outlook, ideology, personality. No more, no less. Usually it takes from 15 to 20 years. What it includes? It includes influencing, or by various methods, infiltration, propaganda methods, direct contacts, doesn't really matter. I will describe them later. Of various areas where public opinion is formulated or shaped. Religion, educational system, social life, administration, law enforcement system, military, of course, and labor and employer relations, economy. Okay? 5 areas. I will not write them down because we'll not have enough space. Sometimes when I describe all the methods, students ask me question, are you sure this is the result of the Soviet influence? Not necessarily. You see, the tactic of subversion, about which I'm talking, is similar to the martial art, the Japanese martial art. If some of you are familiar with that tactic, probably you will remember that if an enemy is bigger and heavier than yourself, it would be very painful to resist his direct strike. If a heavier person wants to strike me in the face, it would be very naive and counterproductive to stop his blow. The Chinese and Japanese judo art tells us what to do. First to avoid the strike, then to grab the fist and continue his movement in the direction where it was before, right? Until the enemy crashes in the wall. You see? So, what happens here? The target country obviously does something wrong. If it's a free democratic society, there are many different movements within the society. There are obviously, in every society, there are people who are against this society. They may be simple criminals, ideologically in disagreement with the state policy, conscientious enemies, simply psychotic personalities who are against anything, right? And finally, there are a small group of agents of a foreign nation.
So what he was describing is the foreign agents assisting the subversive groups in the background to attack a system from within and to help it to break into pieces. And I think we've got a couple of... I can show you a couple of examples of two such organisations at the current time. So looking at an example with Sargon of Akkad, this is their black supremacists versus Michael Moore's white privilege, which leads into the whole Black Lives Matter and the white supremacists, which is, whichever the versions are, we've got conflict which is being pushed from the shadows to break society up. So let's have a look at this. This was came out a year or so ago from Sargon of Akkad. So let's look at this aspect of things and the shredding of society that we need to bring back together.
And so naturally I was thinking that I need to find something entertaining to do a video about.
Aquave, y'all.
Well, Aquave Black Hitler, let's do it.
So, I was on the Twitter, at GhaziCodes on my Twitter, and on my Snapchat, at GhaziCodes on my Snapchat.
Don't worry, I follow you everywhere. You're my favourite black supremacist.
And I kept getting all these people like, Ghazi, you need to listen to Malcolm Moore's new song.
So the reason I've chosen this is because it's, even though I wanted to look at the Black Lives Matter and the white supremacists, this is looking at a broader way, a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek way to try and demonstrate things to you guys of what the situation is before we move back to looking at the more dangerous aspects of things.
White privilege part 2, it's so problematic, blah, 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 blah.
Of course it's problematic. Macklemore is white.
So I listened to it. Actually, no, I read it. I just listened to it because I just can't stand the voices of white people trying to rap. It's just like, you know, scratching a chalkboard.
Oh, me too. I've never heard a Macklemore song, but I imagine it's as awful as you describe.
Anyways, what I did see in his video, and I was like, oh, look at you, Macklemore, acting like a white nationalist male Saxon.
You know, I'm going to write these things down because otherwise I'm going to forget. So, Macklemore is a white nationalist male Saxon.
Using voices of African people to legitimize, you know, your political stance of that song.
Now, I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure his song is called White Privilege 2, in which he complains that he and all of the white people have white privilege and they need to apologise for it and try and get rid of it.
So what we have as an issue is overlooking at someone saying that white people have white privilege, but then opposing that, we then get the people who then get pushed towards defending themselves from accusations of either being white and having privilege or being male and having privilege. And this, so one is pushing blacks and whites apart in society and coloureds and different demographics, and it's looking at feminism and it's looking at male and female to split the genders apart as well, not just male and female, and then into a whole raft of other genders. There seem to be more genders every single day as it all goes on. That's splitting society, and as the Soviet system wanted, they wanted this roller coaster, and they envisaged that this would happen. So let's look at some of the other aspects of things that are happening at the moment. This is looking at BAM, which is By Any Means Necessary, which is a group which sees that they want change in society, and they're willing to do anything whatsoever to achieve their aims. And this is another Sargon of Akkad video.
Today, Bill. We came out today to show our support for the mayor of Berkeley, for all of the activists and leaders in this community, including Yvette Villarca, who've stood up to the trolls that work from the sewers of the internet and support Donald Trump, and have started a campaign to try to intimidate and terrorize people who speak against them, like the mayor. We are calling on the Berkeley School District. We're calling on Yvette's school. We're calling on the teachers union. We're calling on the Berkeley City Council and every other body and organization in this city to take a stand, to make clear, no, this city will not be intimidated.
So what we're looking at is breakups in society, different groups fighting, irrespective, sort of the fundamental things. The reason people get behind things is because there's a reason for them feeling oppressed, and that there isn't a consensus, that their society is moving to the point where the people at the top aren't representing the minority. And which is why we're getting more minorities breaking off, irrespective of the methods they use. If they're following the Solinsky's ways of doing things, the radical side of things, to try and turn their methods into a voice in society to be taken seriously. And what we found on a personal level, what we really have is one person joining a group because they can't stand on their own to get their voice heard. And there's no proper representation, or else these groups wouldn't be able to pull so many people together. And that's the fundamental problem, that the splitting of society based on the Soviet, the KGB model of taking down the West, because they wouldn't just have done it against the US, they would have done it in all Western states, and it's now starting to come to fruition. And not just starting, it's really, really happening with a pace. The plans, amazing plans put into place in the 60s, 70s with the first infiltrations, back to the first infiltrations straight after the war, actually. So World War II, the first infiltrations, this started back in the 1940s. So we are looking 70 years. This has been going on and building up for 70 years. And that's the reality of where we are. We need to stop the groups fighting. We need to have the people who represent us actually speaking for us to help society work together. But with bigger and bigger society, it's governments, the more they try and do, the more they muck up. It's better when you look at the example of, say, the British Empire. It was built on trade and people working together. In the background, it just worked because people just traded, did their thing without real government getting involved, with just a small percentage going to the government, like, oh, we'll just keep out of our hair. Here's a little bit for you to keep you quiet. But then suddenly, government wanted more and more and more control, and the more control they got, the more they wanted. The more jobs they could have, the more people they employed, and suddenly the people who were working, generating the income, generating the profits that helped society grow and work, and people to work together, and it all just fit nicely and have a very neat, progressive, win-win situation, turned into a situation where there's a leech and a parasitic situation on society, just draining the life out of it. And that's what we have today. And the knock-on effect, alongside the pushing of the growing of power, the KGB pushing to help people into those positions to subvert their own communities, to cause the breakup, and to be there at the top of things, helping to undermine society from within. And that's the whole KGB idea. And that's what they've been doing for the past 70 years. And that's where we are today. So looking at the situation, this is a YouTube by Stefan Molyneux with Duke Pester, looking at education, the educational system, which is bringing people through to where we are today and what's been happening to our educational culture. So this will help link through to what's happening underneath so you can see.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. I hope you're doing well, back with our good friend Dr. Duke Pester. He's a tenured university professor, which means he can insult your mama and get away with it. He is an author and the academic director of Freedom Project Academy, which is a live online school offering individual classes and complete curricula for students in kindergarten through high school. You can get his work at www.fpeusa.org. Dr. Pester, how are you doing today?
Stefan, great. Thanks for having me again.
So we're going to talk about cultural Marxism, or as I like to call it, Marxism, and the degree to which it has really swallowed, like Jonah and the whale, it seems to have swallowed the intellectual life of the West almost whole. And we really have a tough time viewing history, viewing literature, viewing philosophy and sociology, and sometimes even psychology outside the lens of this sort of cultural Marxism, social justice warrior fetishism, or whatever you want to call it. So I wonder if you could give people a little bit of a background of what it is, where it came from, and how it either won or is in the process of not winning, depending on how you look at the lens at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Western world spent a lot of time in the Cold War, really since World War II, fighting off fascism, fighting off communism. We were engaged in economic warfare, we were engaged in political, cultural warfare, we were engaged in actual warfare, many places across the world, and we won every time. The values of Western culture, liberty, freedom, all these things you and I have talked about in our previous shows, going back through the Enlightenment, all the way back through the classical world, the values of liberty and freedom won when we actually faced off against the enemies of those things. But all the time we were doing this, we sort of neglected to pay attention to what was going on in the universities and the schools more broadly. And even as we were winning these battles on the ground or in the culture, we were losing them in the schools. You and I had talked about Common Core a few months back. Common Core is nothing more than the pulling down of this cultural Marxism now from the universities to the middle and elementary schools. And not surprisingly, I think it was Vladimir Lenin who made the argument, give me the schools. You can have everything else, just give me the schools. And in a few generations, we'll have completely taken from you everything that you have. And I think cultural Marxism, if we think about the churches.
So this goes back to the point with Yuri Bezmenov saying, following Marxism and Leninism, that by indoctrinating the generations, as we've had for the past, starting 70 years ago, that it's worked its way into our societies to bring us to where we are today. From the society that we had previously, it may not have been the greatest, but we've now got this new situation that we need to adapt to. I just want to move that on. I don't like that face. I'm sorry, Stefan. I'm really sorry. So where we got society, that it's in the state of play that it's at now, with all of the things that society, if you move people from one area to another, they will take their idea and their thoughts of society from that time. So if, say, someone moved over in the 70s from Europe to America, they will bring their idea of Europe at that time as how it was, as a snapshot. Human evolution, everything is constantly in a state of flux, and it's always changing and fighting with different things, vying for power of the hearts and souls of society. And what we're looking at is, in certain areas there's been the destruction of the secular side, and in other areas, like their secular side is growing and gaining power as other secular societies are diminishing, And as things move towards being controlled by people who just want money, who don't have the welfare and the thoughts and the ethos behind it to actually do what's right and do what's good for society, that they're more me, it's about me, that it's moving to a situation where certain cultures are gaining the upper hand and are being allowed to gain the upper hand because as a society and as a culture, they've got people all working together and moving it forward. Whereas in other cultures, like a lot in the West, you've got a lot of splitting. So on one side, you've got a society which is working together, and on the other side, or on other sides, you've got other societies that aren't working together as much, that aren't helping each other as much. So even if they're treading water, as Alexander the Great said, it's not just that I should succeed, but that everyone else should fail. And that by gaining steps, even though other societies stay in the similar position, your society is gaining. But if your enemy is losing ground, losing traction, losing support, then they're diminishing, which means that your gains are even greater. And that's where we are at the present time. And that's the battle that's always going on through society, through the ages, and has always been going on and will always go on. But we need to have the ideas at the heart of societies which stand on their own and mean something to the people. Because if people have nothing to hold on to, if there's nothing underpinning that society, as you sort of see with Lawrence Southern recently interviewing people and looking at what people think is British society. So bear with me, let's have a look at that.
There, okay, so I came out to Whitechapel in London to do some interviews in the area because it's a very multicultural area and we wanted to ask people what they thought the British culture was. Thought it would be an interesting place to do that. Because we were outside the mosque, we started having a guy follow us around with his cell phone and come up to us and basically say, like, you're not allowed to film here, which we perfectly are allowed to film here. It's a public street. The Imam himself ended up calling the police on us for just interviewing people out.
Now, I'm not interested in the side about being called the police. What I'm getting at is looking at why. What people view as the society, because it's the society holding together which gives people an identity and helps move things on. A society without an identity will be lost, and that's as has always happened through society. Society is people collectively coming together to work together to move things forward, and that's where the West has been losing out for the past 70 years and destroying itself for an ideological war within itself. So let's have a look and see about what people think as a snapshot at the moment about British society.
Ask people perfectly safe questions like, what does it mean to be British? Anyways, the police car is just sitting there and they're just waiting for us to get out of here. Well, in your opinion, what do you think it means to be British?
To have the British passport, maybe? Yeah.
So you think it's just to have a British passport?
Yeah, I think, yeah. To be born here, yeah.
Think there's any like cultural aspects to being British?
No, because it's a multicultural country anyway, so you don't have to be a specific culture to be a British. You can be a British and anything else.
It's furries outside a mosque.
What does it mean to be British? I think, for me anyway, British is being multicultural, a society which is multicultural, accepting people of different beliefs, different backgrounds. Modern day Britain is not what it was 300 years ago, where it had its own unique cultures, but now it's a mix of cultures. Does that make sense? Right. Its food had to become mixed, its dress sense has become mixed, because we take the best from the world. That's what British is.
Good thing or a bad thing that the idea of being British doesn't have a cultural aspect to it anymore?
I think it's good. All successful countries are multicultural. I think multicultural is a good thing. That's what makes a country successful.
Do you think that there is a kind of core British culture that's distinct from the multiculturalism, or do you think there is just multiculturalism?
It's just multiculturalism. I don't think there's a specific culture that is part of British. I think being British is embracing all these different cultural differences.
So what we have is a situation where the focus of society in a way, has gone. And Islam is providing a way forward, a structure for families, of bringing things forward, of moving towards the next generation that's been falling away in the West. And for my own view, I think, where are we? And the whole situation of where is society going? Is it the me society? And yes, it's been that way, but what's underpinning it? There are a lot of factors. Academia being infiltrated by Soviet agents, then indoctrinating people. So we need to look at the schools in the background that have been perpetrating, and the ideals, where they came from, to look at what's been undermining Western society, while other cultures have been moving forward, caring about society, caring about people, and working as a community, and they've been striving and thriving and growing, while the West has been fighting amongst itself, destroying itself, as the Islamic society and other societies have been sitting back and watching and thinking, we're just getting on with our own thing. So let's look at what's been underlying in the background of academia to educate the West to be this way at the moment. So back to Stefan Molyneux and Dr. Duke Pester.
Vladimir Lenin, who made the argument, give me the schools. You can have everything else, just give me the schools. And in a few generations, we'll have completely taken from you everything that you have. And I think cultural Marxism, if we think about the churches, you think about liberation theology. In the 50s and 60s, Marxist liberation theology. So this is one of those problems that has multiple names. Call it cultural Marxism. My preferred term for it actually is what you said, social justice education. You think about the 50s and 60s, how South American social justice Marxism imposed itself in the seminaries, particularly in the Catholic Church, and you got liberation theology. We have a liberation theology pope right now. This is the consequence, right? What happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, now the pope of the Roman Catholic Church is himself a social justice Marxist. And you see what you get with this. This is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church standing shoulder to shoulder with Raul Castro, one of the great persecutors of Cubans, of Hispanics, one of the great destroyers of freedom in the Caribbean, Castro, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Pope, lecturing America on its excesses. This is the kind of thing that comes of it. So it has lots of names. You can call it liberation theology when it has a religious tint. You can call it social justice education, the way it's being defined on campuses now. You and I are right. And we could even drop the cultural Marxism. This is Marxism flat out. And in short, what it is the viewing of everything, whether it's culture, gender, science, history, the humanities, religion, viewing everything, economics, through the lens first of progressive progressive, for lack of a better word, progressive philosophy, progressive vocabulary, filtering everything through the lenses of progressive thought. So studying math, as you and I talked about in Common Core, studying math is less about math than it is about the sociology of math. And that's true of everything else. And so we call it cultural Marxism. It's really just Marxism. It is won throughout the university and Western education, and it's destroying generations of kids and destroying what you and I like to refer to as critical thinking, the ability to look at an argument and see not just where it works, but where it fails.
And there's a weird contradiction right at the heart of this. And first of all,
so what we're looking at is cultural Marxism has come in from Marxism, from the end of the Cold War, from before then, back to the war, with the destruction of society, the secular side of things on the one side, and the growth of other secular cultures in opposition as a way of life, as a way forward. As at the heart of things, it's about family and children and society and people helping each other. You have on the one side a society like Islam, which is growing, that more people are moving towards, because it offers so much to that fundamental precept of moving forward and having a future, having children, and making life better. Whereas on the other side, there's a lot of materialism without so much secularism, with a lot of conflict that needs to be addressing. And this is the situation. The groups that are fighting and infighting, their own individual perspectives are very, very real and very pertinent to them. And they always would be. Yours, mine, everyone's individual perspective is that's what we're focused on at the moment. But there's a bigger societal issue of what is fundamentally happening, irrespective of what was put in place by the Russians after the Second World War, which done an incredible job. But where we are today, it doesn't matter how we got here. It's about looking at where we are and what the issues are and what needs doing about it. It's about fundamentally the future of our species. That's it. That's the fundamental aspect of everything. There is no more. You can fancy it all up in as many words as you want, but it's all about family, children, and the future. Without family, children, and the future, you have nothing. You have nothing going forward. The human race dies out. Boom, it's gone. And it's the best way forward for our society and our culture and our world as everything moves forward. So we've got different cultures fighting. You've got different secular ideologies working within that, fundamentally for the ethos for moving things forward. Where do we want to be? So I'm putting a question out there to you. Where do you see things? Where do you see moving forward? How can we build society? How can we help it all pull together for the next evolution? That everything is always in a state of flux. Everything has always been moving forward. It's always been changing. But it's moving it forward in the best way. Where are we? It's looking at what's come before, so mistakes of the past aren't made, so that things are able to be put in place to help society in the best way. What is the bigger picture? Where are things? Who is winning in the heart of the family? What is supporting the family without destroying the financial underpinning? You could give lots of money to people having children, but what does that do for the society underpinning it when the money for it, the cost of it, is actually being borrowed from the future generations you're claiming to be creating it for? It's very short-termist, it's very blinkered, and it's built on sand. Whereas on the other side, that's a lot of the Western side of things, built on sand fundamentally. And Islam at the moment is built on rock. It's built on a firm foundation. Whether you agree with Islam and how things are, it's fundamentally strong. Western society is fundamentally flawed. And that's where we're finding ourselves. It's not about breaking things into pieces. It's pulling it all together to move things forward as everything either integrates, shatters, and all those shattered pieces, where do they go? How do things work? Where are we going for the future? And I'll leave you with that. I hope this has helped. It's my look at a certain aspect. There's so much more. I had to get this out there. It's so important, and sorry it's been so long. Thank you so much for watching. There's so many questions, so many transient points, so many different views on different aspects, but it all comes back to the fundamental thing of the family and moving things forward in a positive way to help future generations and to have the right environment to allow things to improve. And that's where we are. I'm the Gaming Bear. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next one. Take care, guys. Bye.